back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving a 2008 Lotus Elise SC, or Supercharged. We all know that they made a Supercharged Exige, but for a little while they were making Supercharged Elises as well, and this car is very cool because they've strapped a blower to the 1.8-liter four-cylinder that revs to the moon, and now she's got a little extra torque. So instead of 189 horsepower, it's making about 220, 218 horsepower. Not a giant jump by most standards, but because this car weighs so little, that is pretty significant. And there's a couple ways to distinguish this SC from its naturally aspirated cousins. Number one, the wheels. These are special wheels for the SC. And number two, the only other Elise that got this wing was the 72D edition. So this is pretty special. This is a really trick wing, and you can tell because the way it wraps around the body. So very subtle, other than the fact that there are Elise Supercharged badges all over the car. Now I love Lotus because the old Colin Chapman adage of simplify and add lightness still applies, but you know, it's getting harder and harder to do that with all of the safety regulations and emissions regulations, and this Elise kind of represents to me how cool can you get, because while yes, we have added power, we have not added weight. The Supercharged edition only weighs about 3 pounds more. That's pretty great. As adorable as the Elise is, it has such a presence, and this rear end is incredible. So while it's not a very large car, it does have a wide stance, and the camber in the rear just makes it look so cool. This one has this great oval single exit exhaust with its beautiful under tray and diffuser behind it. Of course, you can take the roof off of your Elise. You can roll up your fabric top, and there are hard tops that you can put in place of it. But today, it's kind of a chilly fall day. We're going to keep the roof on and hopefully put some power down to those rear wheels. Up front, it looks like an insect, a happy insect, and this little lip spoiler down here has certainly seen the business end of a curb before, and that's fine because we like drivers. This is a driver. So let's go out, have a little bit of fun. But first, let me show you under the hood. Now, there's not a ton of space back here, but plenty for a little weekend trip. The only thing, and I've put all my stuff down here, and we got to put that plate back on, it gets a bit warm, so don't put your ice cream in the trunk of your Elise. Up here, you can see our 1.8-liter Yamaha designed engine by Toyota and a supercharger that is not intercooled. This roughly 1,900-pound sports car is glued to the road with a 195 section front and a 225 section rear. Now let's hop in. We just push here, open our door, and the only way to jump into an Elise, really, you've got to go butt first. It never gets easier, but you know, some people will say, oh, there's no problem. Well, look, I've been photographing this car for the last hour. Yeah, you know what? You get in and out of it about 20 times. You get good at it, but it's always a little bit of a pain. Put our key in, hit our immobilizer button. Engine start stop button on the left. Jumps straight to life. We've been out for a little drive. She's a bit warmed up. Not a crazy supercharger whine or anything, but when you get into it in the mid-range, you start to notice there's a little extra juice in there. Now, I've got all my stuff in here, including a water bottle, because this one has a cup holder, the ultimate North America option, but actually it's kind of convenient. And relative to the Ariel Atom, this is downright luxurious. Cabin of the Lotus Elise is always an event because there's a lot of vibrations. It's just a little guy. You hear everything going on with the car. So it's rare that you're going to jump into an Elise and it's devoid of sounds. I mean, that's the deal. You're getting a little British sports car, but it is incredibly potent when you jump into it. This car is all about carving around back roads. Despite its forced induction, it still definitely likes the high revs. But now you've got all this mid-range punch that you can play with instead of having to keep it elevated at the moon like the standard car without the supercharger. But all the controls feel the same. They're still strong, they're still easy to manipulate. The gates on the shifter are really easy to find. The steering is, of course, sublime and it's impossibly manual. Now, I'm not certain, but it feels like this is a beefier clutch than the standard car to handle the torque. It's a little heavier, but still not hard on your left foot, light enough. But the Lotus is just no frills. It's designed to be as little stuff as possible and as much car as possible. Just you and the thing, you and four wheels. It's a luxury that you get boot space in this thing, and that's something you should be grateful for. But other than that, it's just meant to be a driver. The Supercharged Elise doesn't feel overpowered at all, though. It feels like they could have still gone a step further. This could do with 300 horsepower. 220 is plenty, and it suits it just fine. But you know what I like about it is that it's not deadly. It means you can still chuck it into a corner and fluctuate your foot without fear of death that you're going to spin the car. I mean, I'm sure you could, but it's not like the AMG cars where you know, the new 4-liter, I know this is a crazy comparison, but like a 4-liter twin-turbo AMG now, you give it just a hint too much, and you are really roasting rear tires, and that's just not the vibe of this car. It still feels plenty balanced. It just gives you a bunch of torque in the mid-range. Power windows, what a luxury. It for days. It's incredible. The nice thing about it too, though, is because it's such a small, fun, plucky little thing, even driving it around somewhat normally, somewhat tame, is entertaining. It's a sense of occasion, and more modern cars are losing that sense of occasion. You've got to go balls to the walls in basically everything now to have any fun with it. And I mean, that's fine, I guess, but I don't really want to subject myself to that kind of exposure when it comes to the law. I mean, I want to have my fun and shut it down in a reasonable manner, but that doesn't mean I want to be bored the rest of the trip. And I'm certainly never bored in this thing. The extra kick from the supercharger just really allows you to enjoy lower revs. You can play with the car around 4,000 to 6,000 RPM rather than always needing it. Now, I understand maybe that's a detraction for some of you. Detraction, I don't know if that's a word, but maybe that's a downside. I assure you, though, the high end of this car is still quite accessible and fun, and you can use it as often as you want. You're just gonna, get there faster. It's very cool that Lotus made these cars with superchargers from the factory, rather than being some, aftermarket thing you'd have to strap onto it later on. They were committed. They were committed to giving their customers what they wanted, and I really appreciate that. That you've got to temper yourself. I mean, I'm short shifting for a second because why do I need to spin up the rears on that turn? Just an odd feeling in the Elise. And then you just shut it right down and enjoy yourself. No one's the wiser. The wing does obstruct your view just a little bit in the rear view. The thing is, though, nothing is shorter than you, so whatever's back there is surely above you. Something to keep in mind when you're driving your tight little short wheelbase mid-engine sports car, especially in the fall. There are some wet leaves, there's some debris on the ground. We want to make sure we're not going to get caught up. Luckily, there is a traction control system in the car that does a pretty good job of keeping us in line, but it's not going to save you if you really mess it up. Plenty of road noise on the highway. There's 70 miles an hour. You just get what do you expect? You're not going to have something that's going to do the 1,900-pound car and also be a well-insulated cabin. But you know what you can do? You get yourself a little trailer. You put a set of slicks on that with another set of wheels and trailer this to the track because it'll do the job just fine. Definitely one of those two hands on the wheel kind of cars too, because you can feel it pulling wherever the road wants to go, which is fine. But yeah, just have your wits about you. So I wouldn't say that this Lotus Elise Supercharged SC is a hot rod. It's not like some hoon. But what it does do is it gives you just enough. It turns the dial up a couple notches on the standard Elise for those of you who just needed a little more power in the equation. No joke. That's doing the job. This little supercharger does quite enough to make this thing competitive in a straight line. So the Elise was fast enough on its own, but now it's got mid-range torque, which is a blessing. It's fantastic. I mean, you can actually kind of claw your way out of a corner in third gear. So maybe, if anything, it just requires a little less skill to drive because you don't have to think quite as hard. You don't need to keep the revs up quite as high. Maybe it actually helps the engine survive for spinning less or less because it's putting more load on those bearings. Who knows? Don't care. It's fun. So thank you to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts for an opportunity to drive a variation of one of my favorite cars, the Lotus Elise. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive. And do yourself a favor. Drive everything. Someone tosses you the keys to something, a Grand Marquis or a Lotus Elise. Go drive it, experience it, have some fun. You know what I like about this Lotus Elise too is that it's a street car. I mean, yes, you can take it to the track and have plenty of fun, but it still has a bit of body roll. I mean, it is genuinely designed to be a little road-going fun toy. I certainly don't mean it's comfortable, but it's not so rock solid that you can't play with it and let it lean into a corner.